Not myself, I'm an entrance.
I've not talked to her about naughty stuff like the MP. Well, I hope it's not on there. It's on the councillor's laptop.
Okay, good evening everybody. It's 6:30 and welcome to this meeting of Royal Berkshire Fire Authority. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Faith?
Chairman, I've received apologies from Councillors Bateson, Brooks, Chima, Shepherd Bay, Lovelock, Simpson and Werner.
Thank you. Is anybody else bringing apologies? Councillor Gittings?
Yes, Councillor Minhas, she just texted me, she's caught in a work meeting, so she sends her apologies as well.
Thank you. And Councillor Linden?
Yeah, Councillor Garth Simpson.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Please may I receive declarations of interest from councillors relating to items to be considered on this evening's agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Fire Authority Local Code of Conduct and any from officers. Councillor Ross?
In case there is any business for TVSCS, just declaring an interest as a member of the Joint Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Cannon?
Likewise for control service.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Agenda item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting that was held on the 15th and also the meeting held on the 5th of April. There were 3 actions in the Part 1 minutes held on the 15th of February. Nikki, I understand that the Action ICT business case has been completed. Is that correct?
Yes, Chairman, I can confirm it has.
Thank you very much indeed. Faith, can you confirm the action completed on the EDI forum invites to Councillor Lovelock?
Yes, Chairman, I can confirm it has. I have.
Thank you. And I understand the other action is completed and it's included in item 12 of this agenda pack. Is that right, Becky?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much indeed. So the recommendation is that the Part 1 minutes of the meeting held on the 15th and the 5th of April be confirmed as a correct record and signed by myself. Does anybody wish to abstain or vote against that? Then I'll take that as carried. Thank you. Agenda item 4 is petitions and questions from the public under Standing Orders 19 and 25. None received. Thank you. And therefore we'll go on to agenda item 5. Members, sadly, I have to report to you that and start the announcements this evening with some sad news. Henry Holcroft passed away suddenly on Saturday the 26th of March. Now, Henry joined the on-call section at Bracknell Fire Station on July 1982 and secured a whole-time position the following year. Henry principally served at Bracknell, Langley and Whitley Wood before retiring in 2013. However, that wasn't enough for Henry. He embarked on the next stage of his fire service career in a role as a hydrant inspector, and a role that he occupied since 2013. So Henry has dedicated almost 40 years of his life to serving the people of Berkshire, for which we, as a service and as a fire authority, are eternally grateful. And I'm sure the communities he served will also be grateful for his work. Henry's family will be celebrating his life to say goodbye to him tomorrow on Friday the 29th. The service will be playing a part in the celebration, including a parade outside Bracknell Fire Station, which I intend to attend on your behalf. But members, can I please ask that we stand for a minute's silence in commemoration of Henry. Thank you.
Thank you, members. This evening, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Catherine Richardson. Sorry.
The mic's not turned off. This evening, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Catherine Richardson, who's our Service Liaison Lead from Her Majesty's Inspectors of Constabulary and Fire Rescue Services. I understand that Catherine is joining us this evening online, so you're very welcome, Catherine, and welcome. Thank you. Catherine is joining us today ahead of the service's inspection, which is due to commence in June. So be kind to us, Catherine, please. Thank you, and welcome to this evening. Members, on April the 8th, the whole-time firefighter apprentices who joined us in January were formally welcomed at a graduation ceremony held at the training centre. The graduates demonstrated some of the skills that they had learned over the 13-week course by performing a series of drills in front of their friends and families. They were handed certificates to mark their entry into the service as whole-time firefighters, and two firefighters, Ben Russell and Daniel Metcalf, were also recognised for their efforts with the Silver Axe Award and the Endeavour Award, respectively. I thoroughly enjoyed formally welcoming all 18 firefighter apprentices and their families at the ceremony, and wish the firefighters well in their future careers at Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service. I was especially pleased to see so many Fire Authority members in attendance on that day. I'm sure the firefighter apprentices will appreciate your attendance. Thank you. It was a lovely afternoon. Members, I wanted to update you on the Chairman's Internship, which is a paid internship for young people who are from ethnic backgrounds that are currently underrepresented within our service. Thank you to everyone that shared details of the scheme with prospective applicants. The application window for the scheme has now closed, and the project team have begun the selection process ahead of the summer, when 8 successful applicants will join us for between 5 and 6 weeks to develop their workplace skills, to gain experience, and to support the future education or their career ambitions. I'm absolutely thrilled that we've had such a healthy response to this. I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder by mentioning it, but I'm sure we'll mention it during the meeting. Members, a second convoy, including vehicles and equipment, has been sent by fire and rescue services from across the UK to assist the humanitarian effort in Ukraine. The work is being coordinated by Fire Aid, the National Fire Chiefs Council and the wider sector, where all items will then be sent on to those that need them. As part of the second convoy, Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service has donated 2 fire appliances with firefighting equipment stowed on board. 6 members of staff volunteered to drive the vehicles, firstly to Ashford Fire Station for a day of orientation training before departing for Poland on the 21st of April, and they returned to us on the 25th. Now, alongside other fire and rescue services, we've donated this equipment through the National Fire Chiefs Council to assist the emergency services in their response, and we stand in solidarity with our fellow emergency responders in Ukraine. A further 2 vehicles are being prepared by our service for donation, and it's intended that they will follow a similar route, and updates will be provided to you in due course. And thank you to everybody in the service who has volunteered to support this effort. I did actually see, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen on social media, the crews and the flags that they displayed on the departure of the fire engines. Incredibly proud to see them, and I'm sure you'll all join me in wishing them well.
Yeah.
Members, we held our second in-person Armed Forces Veterans Hub at Whitley Wood Fire Station on the 30th of March. The fantastic initiative supports our Armed Forces community to connect with fellow veterans and organisations that can support, advise and guide ex-veterans of the armed services. Our continued pledge to hosting these veterans hubs at fire stations across Berkshire exemplifies our ongoing commitment to supporting the Armed Forces Covenant. And thank you to everybody who took part in the day, especially Councillor Ross and Shay Scott, who I know led the event. So thank you very much indeed. But thank you to everybody that took part in that. More congratulations, members, and I'd like to sincerely congratulate Emily Gregory, who is the service's fire engineering lead. Emily has achieved a Master's in Fire Engineering from the University of Ulster. Emily is one of 2 members of staff funded by the Fire Authority to study fire engineering at Ulster, and the investment was part of the authority's approach to increase investment in protection activities. This was extremely demanding, and the course was extremely demanding, I'm sure, but despite this, Emily has also achieved an award for the best dissertation and also has achieved a distinction. The personal and professional investment Emily has made in completing this course has already provided invaluable protection work for our residents. Very well done, Emily, well done. And finally, members, but certainly not least, we have to say goodbye this evening to Councillors Ross and Stanford Bill, who will be standing down this May. Councillor Ross joined the Fire Authority on the 6th of September 2000. He's seen the establishment of the Thames Valley Fire Control Services, TVFCS, and has served as a TVFCS Joint Committee member since it was established in 2015. He was chairman of this committee in the last 12 months. He's also the lead member for our strategic assets. He's also the chairman of Property Development Working Group, and he was central in the development of the refurbishment and build of tri-emergency fire stations in Hungerford, Crowthorne and of course our new fire station in Thiel. And he's been an integral representative on our Armed Forces Veterans Hub. And he is our Armed Forces Honorary Champion. Angus, you'll be missed by members and officers alike. And I will certainly miss you. I will miss your advice and your guidance, and I really appreciate the time I've spent working with you and alongside you. As such, I'd like to present you with a small token of something from the fire service that I hope you will appreciate. Angus. And normally these are only given to firefighters, so I know that Angus will understand.
Hope this doesn't mean I have to start a fire.
No, that means you've got the chop.
Christian, can you go and do this instead? It's some weird thing.
She wants to technical done. Ready? Can we just do one? Yeah. Shake hands again. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, by all means, yeah.
Everyone talk orders. So happens today, it's 42 years to the day since I moved to Berkshire. But little did I realise then that 10 years later I'd become a councillor, and 10 years after that I'd joined the Fire Authority, and then still be here in 2022. But it's been an enjoyable journey. I've enjoyed all the bits. I think the list of things you said I'm involved with makes me almost feel I've been greedy in having all these involvements, but I've enjoyed all of them. But I think it only comes to me to say, as colleagues, and that's all the officers and the members, to wish you all well, especially with the inspection coming up. And I'm sure you'll all go from strength to strength. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Angus. We also have to say goodbye this evening to Councillor Stanford Bill, who joined the Fire Authority for 1 year in 2015-16 and was reappointed again, because we missed her so much, on the 26th of June 2019. Now, Jane has served the Audit and Governance Committee, and on behalf of Royal Berkshire Fire Authority was a member of the Task and Finish group that developed a response to the National Fire Chiefs Council consultation, which was Fit for the Future, which was in November 2000. In early 21, in her role as Chief Executive Officer of Autism Berkshire, Jane was awarded the Census 2021 Community Hero Purple Plaque Award. That's not easy to say, Jane. And I'm sure it wasn't easy to achieve either. For her work serving families living across Berkshire with autism during COVID-19. On behalf of the Fire Authority and officers, I would sincerely like to thank Jane for the work she's done while she's been here. I wish her well, and I know that she will go on to even greater things. Congratulations, Jane. Vice Chair, I know you wanted to say a few words, didn't you?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. You have already said goodbye to Jane and Angus, but I wanted to add something specifically about Angus, as I've worked with him for 32 years as a fellow ward councillor, after he was elected in a December by-election by just a few hundred voters, although after that, of course, he won election after election with resounding victories. This is the second saddest day of my time on the Fire Authority. The saddest will be next Thursday, when Angus officially stands down as a borough councillor. I've found him personally inspirational with his energy and enthusiasm, as well as a very good friend. The list of things he's done in his 22 years on the Fire Authority is huge. He's been spearheading so much. The refurbishment of Hungerford, 2 brand new fire stations at Crowthorne and Thiel, TVFCS, the Veterans Hub, the purchase of new fire engines, to name but a few. He's a total professional, and I don't know how we're going to manage without him. We shall miss his knowledge and experience, and I think that we'll miss them far more than we realise once he's gone and he's no longer here to advise us. Already as a ward councillor, he's passing some of his work to his ward colleagues that he's been doing right up to his very last time as a councillor, and it's more than I ever realised that he was involved in. And I think my fellow councillor and I are going to be cut out to be able to do so much and do such a good job with it. But most of all, I personally shall miss him as a colleague and a friend. Angus, have a very long and happy retirement, and thank you on all our behalfs for all that you've done for the Fire Authority. We shall miss you.
Well done. Councillor Gittings, I know you wanted to say a few words.
Yeah, just to say a few words, and obviously say goodbye to Councillor Stamford Bills, who already knows we're political opponents in Reading, but we're sorry to lose her from the council. I know she's made a contribution. All councillors make contributions to committees working together, which I think is sometimes the public sort of fail to understand. That a lot of the time, we work on all sorts of areas in collaboration, and it's the same here on the Fire Authority. And it's the same, obviously, with Angus. I've actually was on the RE3 board, which is with Angus, as well as the Fire Authority. And Angus is a person that you can tell from the tributes of the highest standards of public servant. To do 32 years as a councillor and 22 years on this Fire Authority is quite something. And I know that his work is of really impeccable standard, and I think that's reflected in the report that he's at the end of the League Champions reports to his strategic assets, and obviously as the Armed Forces Champion. So as Councillor, as the Vice Chair has said, it will be very, very hard to replace actually on the authority, leave a massive gap, and I'm sure on his local authorities. So on behalf of the Labour Group, I wanted to say, thank you, Angus, for the work you've done on the authority. I'm sure it's appreciated by the people of Berkshire.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, that's the end of my announcements. Has anybody else got any announcements they wish to make? Thank you. Agenda item 6 is issues arising from the Audit and Governance Committee. I understand there weren't any, which is always good news. Agenda item 7 is questions from members under Standing Order 30. None received, thank you. And agenda item 8 is notices of motions under Standing Order 44. None received, thank you. Agenda item 9 is recommendations of committees, which is adoption of the Fire Authority Member Code of Conduct, which has been recommended from the Audit and Governance Committee on the 23rd of March. Agenda item 10 is the core code of ethics for fire and rescue services. I understand, Nikki, you have a brief presentation you'd wish to give us on this.
I do, thank you, Chairman. I think Faith is just going to get the presentation up. Just testing the clicker. Good evening, members, and thank you for giving me the time to give you some update on the Core Code of Ethics. Many of you will have seen some of this presentation before, because we've been talking about the Core Code of Ethics now for a good couple of years, but we have now finalised it. Both the NFCC and LGA submitted that standard early last year, and now we have implemented it. So I just wanted to bring you up to date and share a bit more information. So for those members who may not have been on the authority when we started discussing this, I thought it worthwhile to provide a bit of background. So the driver for change came from the State of Fire 2019, so that was the original inspection programme for HMIC FRS, and recommendation 4 was that the sector should have a code of ethics for fire and rescue services, and it should be achieved by December 2020. The COVID meant that we missed that a little bit, but I was lucky enough to be involved in some of the creation of the work, so we managed to get it over the line in 2021. The purpose of the code really was to develop and provide clarity for the sector. It was to provide a clear understanding for the general public as regards the expected standards of professional behaviour. It was to allow the sort of fundamental principles of the core code of ethics to be used as a baseline on which to develop our own values, vision, mission and strategic business plan, and that's certainly the way that we've approached it in Berkshire. The FRS should make sure that the principles within the core code become part of working life, and I believe that we are doing that, and all FRS personnel are expected to use the code. The code itself is based on the Nolan principles, on which I'm sure you're all very familiar, and what I've done here is pull out what the actual 5 ethical principles of the core code now are. So it's around putting communities first, around acting with integrity, dignity and respect, leadership and equality, diversity and inclusion. You'll see when we look across what we had and what we've got, you've got the Nolan principles there in pink, you've had the employee code of conduct as was before we looked at the code of ethics, and then the areas for the code of ethics. You'll see for us there was always quite a great deal of overlap, so that has made the full adoption of the code quite straightforward. So this is the new Employee Code of Conduct for RBFRS, and it was signed off by the Audit and Governance Committee as part of their terms of reference earlier this year. And I won't read them all out, and I realise it might be slightly small text, but you will see that I've highlighted in red those areas of the Employee Code of Conduct which align directly to the fire standard. So you can see that we have fully adopted all the elements of the fire standard. And we've added in a few more bits for good measure, just to ensure that we cover the range of behaviours that we want to see and the range of values that support the organisation. So I thought, this is Berkshire, so we are one team. So I thought it important not to steal the monitoring officer's presentation later on, but I thought it useful to identify that members too have taken into consideration the Code of Ethics, and notwithstanding you have a decision on whether you choose to accept that, the recommendation from Audit and Governance is that you do. You will see that we are again one team for Berkshire, and we do have both similar cores of ethics running through both the service and the authority. It was a very quick presentation, Chairman, but I'm conscious we do have a busy agenda this evening, and this has been quite familiar to members before. So very happy to take any questions, but that is the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Nikki. Do members have any questions? No? Good. We're all treating each other with integrity and respect. That's always good, isn't it? Thank you.
Okay.
We'll move on then. Thank you, Nikki. We move on to agenda item 11, which is our built environment presentation. Members, you will know that since the terrible tragedy at Grenfell Tower, the built environment has been highest on our agenda, and Nusha is going to give us a presentation as where we are at the moment with that. Is it Nusha? Oh, there you are. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to update you all on the progress of the Built Environment Programme ahead of the launch of the third edition of the Progress Report, which is due out in May. Firstly, I wanted to just remind you of all why the programme was set up and what we wanted to achieve. So let me take you back to the 14th of June 2017 when a fire took hold in Grenfell Tower, a high-rise residential building within London, which sadly resulted in 72 people losing their lives. Following this incident, Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service introduced a 4-phase plan to manage the immediate and anticipated implications. As part of Phase 3, responding to new information, the Built Environment Programme was set up in early 2020 with myself as Programme Manager and Mark Arkwell, Deputy Chief Fire Officer, as Programme Sponsor. We have intentionally been concentrating our efforts on providing assurance that the 46 recommendations within the Grenfell Inquiry Phase 1 report have been assessed and that any areas of concern identified have been appropriately addressed, whilst also ensuring that our targeted high-risk premises have been audited and are compliant with the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. Since we last updated you in November, some of our achievements include: we now have electronic premise information plates available for all 187 high-rise residential buildings within Berkshire, which enables our crews to have a simple one-page view of operational risk information during an incident. Joint familiarisation visits between crews and fire safety inspectors are taking place. This enables them to share knowledge, experience and understand the risks each areas are looking for. We've created a 5th work stream looking at the end-to-end command support process. Operation Willowbeck has been launched within Thames Valley Control, which enables calls to be filtered and diverted during live incidents, allowing us to concentrate on the calls requiring fire survival guidance. And we've now developed and rolled out fire survival training guidance within our within our Thames Valley Control. So as previously mentioned, there were 46 recommendations within the Phase 1 report. Only 29 of those were specifically aimed at fire and rescue services. However, as a service, we felt it was appropriate to not only consider the specific fire and rescue services recommendations, but also how we can play our part in supporting other stakeholders in improving safety across the built environment to benefit the residents of Berkshire. Therefore, we have incorporated all 46 within our programme and have treatments and tasks in place to manage these where they are within our direct control. We are progressing well and in line with where we thought we would be. However, we are not rushing to mark these recommendations as being complete until we are entirely satisfied and confident that our crews have a thorough understanding of what we are trying to achieve and can see it is making a difference. A good example of this is we have 3 recommendations whereby we have developed and issued the training that would fulfil the recommendation, but only when we are confident that our crews have completed it and to the required standard will we mark it as complete. In regards to the 17 additional recommendations that are not specific to fire and rescue services, we are making recommendations to responsible persons, but we are very much reliant on the upcoming legislative changes for us to be able to complete these. But we are in a good position to be able to do this when they are in place. Some of the recommendations require significant sector-wide change, which is beyond our direct control. Where this is the case, we are working and engaging with others to support and influence wider change where we can. Multi-agency incident transfer, known as MATE, is a good example of this. We cannot implement this alone, but we do have senior user representation and a strategic lead at the NFCC project board to enable us to support and influence where possible. We are now heading into the final stages of this phase of the programme, where we still have a number of tasks to complete, but we are beginning to focus our attentions on the embedding and assurance of the changes we have already implemented across the service. We have a number of assurance exercises planned between now and the end of the year, looking at areas such as communications, incident command, testing of new equipment and mass evacuation. These are fantastic opportunities for us to really test what we've done so far, working with our crews, Thames Valley Control and our partner agencies. We have crew engagement sessions taking place currently, where we're taking the opportunity to meet with all watches so they can gain a better understanding of what the programme is doing, but more importantly, capture the feedback on the work that we've done so far and what they would like to see in the future. The service is working with the Protection Policy and Reform Unit within the NFCC and the Building Regulations Advisory Committee in regards to becoming a delivery partner for the Golden Thread. This will provide us with an opportunity to lead the sector and gain a better understanding of future requirements in this area. Within the work we're doing with the quality impact assessments within the programme, we have identified areas of work that need adjusting to meet various needs. This has included how we communicate with the residents of high-rise residential buildings, as well as influencing wider parts of the organisation. The programme is keen to share the good work it's achieved so far with others, both internally and externally. And some of the things that we've shared already include, we've shared all of our LMS packages, so our online training packages with other fire and rescue services, including the external cladding systems package, where we believe we're one of the only fire rescue services to have produced one of this nature. We've shared programme documents with other projects in the organisation. Our Thames Valley partners attend our workstream meetings so they're able to benefit from the work we are producing within these areas. And we attend cross-border exercises with partner agencies and local authorities. So, phase 1 of our high-rise residential buildings project was completed last year, which saw all of our 187 high-rise residential buildings within Berkshire audited. We are now within phase 2, where we continue to manage those buildings that are not compliant during phase 1, as well as supporting our protection hubs with the buildings that have returned to business as usual. We are working closely with building owners and responsible persons alongside our partners and local authority housing teams, conducting joint inspections, making joint decisions, and when necessary, ensuring enforcement action is taken and interim measures are applied. We recognise that the full remediation of a building can be a long process, and there are already several examples of premises where fire safety has been significantly improved as a result of the team's work with building owners and responsible persons. 13 buildings within Berkshire have already had their cladding removed, with a further 20 who are in the process of having it removed currently. We have 24 buildings within interim measures, which are visited by our project team, as well as receiving monthly visits from our operational crews. But 14 buildings have already been removed from that list from the work that we've carried out already. The second phase of the project is due to run until December 2022, after which we should see these buildings returning to business as usual. As you will appreciate, this has been a massive programme of work within a complex and changing environment. Our objectives and priorities have adjusted and changed along the way, and most recently we have simplified our objectives to combine 3 and 4 into one single objective. We have intentionally focused our efforts on objectives 1 and 2, being the 46 recommendations and the 187 high-rise residential buildings, as we believe they pose the most risk to residents and our staff. We are depending on the upcoming legislative and sector-wide changes to fully implement the 46 recommendations and recognise these will bring various demands and challenges. However, I do feel with what we know at this point in time, the service is well placed to understand and address what comes next. The introduction of the Building Safety Regulator and managing their expectations will bring further challenges, including the need to attract, retain and develop skilled staff as the sector's demand grows. We continue to keep a close eye on Grenfell Phase 2 inquiry, which is likely to end later this year, and is expected there could be a further 40 plus recommendations to consider. The service is working hard to ensure that we're well placed to understand and address all of these challenges, but we do recognise that this is the start of a long journey of transformation. We continue to be thankful for the investment and support from the Fire Authority have provided to this work to date, along with the additional money received from the government. However, this continues to remain a consistent pressure for the service and authority and will do so for some time. I hope you agree that we've accomplished so much within the programme, and we will continue to update you with our progress using progress reports as well as future presentations. Thank you for your time today, and is there any questions?
Thank you, Lucia. First question from me is, well, a comment, but well done, about the 14 buildings that have been brought back from, sorry.
Well done from the 14 buildings that have been brought back. How confident are we, do you believe, of bringing the rest of these buildings back to, reasonable measures as far as fire safety is concerned? Do you see that as a long process?
Okay, we've got Ivan Spohr on the call today, who is he manages the HRRB project. So I'm going to ask him to come in because he will have a better understanding of that, if that's okay, Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Lucia. That's great.
Ivan, I understand you're on the call.
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Did you hear my question?
I did, yes.
Thank you.
And the question, if I heard it correctly, was how confident are we that these buildings will get to a point where they are remediated? The buildings that are in interim measures, of which there are 24 at the moment, we visit them on a monthly basis. So we go to meetings with developers, with planning meetings, we visit waking watches at those buildings, and we are fairly confident that by December of this year, based on the plans that we're hearing from those responsible persons who run those buildings, and from the current plans that are in place for those buildings, we're hoping that there are only 10 left on the list, provided we don't find any new buildings, by December 2022. So that will be a significant portion of those buildings. There are quite a few that are well along in that process of having applied for cladding funding, scaffolding's up, many of them the scaffolding's up and the cladding has been removed and not fully remediated, but well along in the process. So I'm fairly confident that number will drop down, but remediating any of these buildings is a fairly lengthy process and can take years. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I've got one other question that kind of follows on from your answer, where you mentioned new buildings. One of my roles is on the planning committee at Bracknell Forest Council. I'm sure there are other members here that serve on their individual planning committees of the unitary authorities. Of course, buildings are being built all the time, and I know that certain buildings above, I think it's 18 metres, is it, are going up. Are you getting support from the unitary authorities making you statutory consultees when it comes to these high-rise buildings to make sure that they're safe?
My experience in that is limited because we've been dealing with the audits of these buildings, whereas any statutory consultations have gone still through our hub system and potentially to our engineering team, including Emily, who you mentioned earlier on. But what I have seen, where I have been copied in, that process is working and we are being consulted on. So some of those consultations that come in are purely for existing buildings where they want that cladding remediated. So, and we've seen those as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Gittings.
Sort of on the same lines, and I know in the presentation I made a note of where we're leading Berkshire some extra cladding system. I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about that, because obviously this is one of the main issues, isn't it, the actual claddings. But are we overall confident that we won't have a repeat of the terrible scenes at Grenfell, but within the buildings that are actually going up? Because obviously at Reading we've got high-rise buildings going up. I know we've got planning control, but are we confident that this won't happen again? That the materials being used now are completely safe?
Yeah, Deputy.
Yeah, I think we can be as confident as we can be, and I think that's why we welcome the introduction of the building safety regulator so that we can have absolute confidence and residents can have confidence that those new builds are being designed, built and then managed appropriately.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I was just saying, we were looking back, we mentioned in your presentation about the extra cladding system that Berkshire was leading the way. I was just wondering if you had a bit more information on that, what it is.
So I think that's more around the golden thread that we'll be part of, and we're in talks with them at the moment, so we will have more information as time goes on. But it will give us an opportunity to lead the way once we've started that and we're part of that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, do you want a clarification on that, Jeff?
I can clarify, just to be absolutely crystal clear, that there's two things I think you might be referring to. One is the golden thread, which Nusha's talked about, and that's more around ultimately a data sharing or information sharing exercise, so not a cladding system per se. It enables information to come from the building designers, owners, into the building regulatory system and to us and ultimately to our crews. And then I think in terms of the LMS package, the external wall system that Nusha referred to, that's around an understanding and a training and an online package that we've been able to share, develop and then share with the sector rather than, again, a specific system in its own right.
Right, okay, no, thanks. I mean, it's in a sense, it's a fail-safe system now being built in, so obviously we don't hopefully have a repeat of these of those scenes for that reason, isn't it? It's it seems to me we've got extra safeguards in place, and that would seem the golden thread would seem to be one way of doing that. So that's good.
Thank you, Councillor Gittings. Any other questions, members? Okay, so there's no other questions. Thank you very much indeed, Nusha, and congratulations on the work that you and the team are doing at the moment. It's incredibly important that we make sure that our residents are safe in high-rise buildings, in fact in all buildings. I'll come to that. Okay, thank you. We move on then to agenda item 12, which is the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Objectives, and a presentation from Becky, who I understand is going to introduce Chloe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we are treating you to another presentation tonight. This is in support of the papers you've got in front of you, which have considered the revised equality, diversity and inclusion objectives following public consultation. The methodology and the response to the consultation is set out in the documents, but to provide some detail to that, Chloe's going to give us a presentation. So I'm going to pass to Chloe now.
Thank you, Becky. So firstly, apologies that I'm not able to be there in person due to COVID, but very happy to be here via Teams nonetheless to deliver this in support of the paper. So I'll firstly summarise the results of the consultation and the work that's been conducted following its conclusion, and then more broadly outline the implications of these considerations, how we seek to progress the EDI agenda at RBFRS across the next 4 years. So as a brief reminder, and not seeking to dwell unnecessarily on the legal context, all of which is outlined in the aforementioned report, the basis for revising and renewing these objectives is the Public Sector Equality Duty created under the Equality Act 2010, which stipulates as part of its specific duties for public bodies that we must set equality objectives at least every 4 years. In doing so, we also fulfil the wider requirements that I'm sure we're all familiar with around considering how our policies, actions and decisions affect people protected by the Equality Act, and how we can also work to reduce any inequalities or discrimination that might be identified as a result. So these objectives act as our overarching guide for our EDI work, helping us to organise our actions in pursuit of creating an inclusive culture of equality and diversity in our service. So our previous objectives, which hopefully you can see on your screens, were created by the EDI Forum or in consultation with the EDI Forum back in 2018. So their work led to the creation of these initial 4 objectives, which when it came to review, we felt still largely reflected thematically the main priorities and most useful considerations for the service moving forward. Consequently, as you know, these were reviewed with various internal forums to produce the 4 revised objectives, which again are on the slide. And as I say, these reflect the same thematic priorities, but we've updated the language in various places, firstly to reflect the progress that we've made, also the strength and the authenticity of the commitments that we want to communicate, and indeed the role of every member of our workforce in contributing to the creation of an inclusive culture. So moving to briefly summarise the consultation itself and the response we've received, and apologies at this point to any attendees who've already heard this at the workshop and at the EDI forum. As you might know, the consultation ran for 5 weeks from the 28th of February to the 4th of April, during which time respondents were offered the opportunity to share their thoughts via email, in writing, and primarily through an online survey. A number of different methods were used to encourage engagement, all of which are outlined in more detail in the report, but included for reference a press release issued to local media, and also a letter sent via email to various partner agencies and over 1,000 community contacts as well, in order to encourage the widest possible range of individuals to share their views on the objectives. So in terms of that response, we'll look first at the success of those various methods of engagement with an overview of the demographics of respondents. So firstly, in terms of geography, looking at unitary authorities, the largest response group was from West Berkshire, with similarly significant proportions also coming from Reading, Windsor and Maidenhead, and Wokingham. There was a notably smaller amount of responses from Bracknell Forest and the fewest from Slough, and roughly this follows what we've seen in some previous RBFRS consultations. Secondly, in terms of gender identity, in this consultation, 56.69% of respondents identified as female, with just over 35% identifying as male, and also a small proportion identifying as non-binary or preferring to self-describe or preferring not to say. And it's just interesting to note on this one the contrast with some other previous consultations that we've conducted, where there's been a tendency for a higher proportion of responses to come from those identifying as male. So looking next at ethnicity, 78% of our responses came from those identifying their ethnicity as white British, with all other groups represented accounting individually for less than 3% of responses, and just over 5% preferring not to say. So again, that's a similar pattern that we've seen in some previous consultations, and in a point I'll expand upon later, it speaks to an already identified need to continue exploring the most effective ways to engage with the fullest range of our communities. Regarding age, the largest response group for this consultation was 40 to 49 and 60 and above, with the fewest responses coming, not too surprisingly, from the youngest age groups, and that's again a similar pattern to what we've seen in some previous consultations. For disability in this consultation, 16.67% of respondents identified as having a disability or a long-term health condition, and I think this can really speak to the success of various teams in creating consultations which are accessible and inclusive. But again, it indicates that we can continue to explore ways to maintain or increase the response rate from all groups, ensuring that everybody is enabled to respond and engage. In the question around religion and belief, the main response groups were from those identifying their religion as Christian or as having no religion, and a small percentage of respondents coming from other religious groups. And again, that's similar to what we've seen in some previous consultations. But interestingly for this one, in the Berkshire comparison, the survey does accurately reflect the groups which are the largest in Berkshire, but it doesn't necessarily accurately represent the proportion of other underrepresented groups. And again, that's something that the service is already considering in terms of our engagement more widely. Finally, now sexual orientation can be more difficult to speak to, as until recently there hasn't been, from what I understand, much local authority data that's reliable and publicly available, but nonetheless it remains important for us to ask about, not least considering the subject matter of this consultation. So the predominant response group for this survey was from those identifying as heterosexual or straight, but the consultation did also see more than 5% of respondents identifying as gay or lesbian, and almost 4% identifying as bisexual. There was also a comparatively low prefer not to say response to some other previous consultations. So really what those demographics speak to is, although some of the categories are represented really positively in the Berkshire comparison or overall, we've already identified this need to consider in all respects how we can continue to improve the way in which we engage with our diverse community, both for the purposes of consultation, but also more widely to provide greater encouragement to understand and engage with the full range of our services. And that's something that we know is being worked on in the service already, and which all the consultation results that are covered tonight will help to direct moving forward. So moving on then to summarise the response from those individuals. As I mentioned, we asked in the consultation for respondents to tell us whether they agreed or disagreed with each objective, and for any further thoughts which they wished to share. So overall, of the 180 completed surveys, the predominant response for each of the objectives was agreement. The lowest agreement rate was for Objective 1, which is around increasing the diversity of staff at all levels, at 82.78%, and the highest agreement rate was for Objective 4, which is the one around creating an inclusive culture, at almost 94%. Objective 2 and 3 between this were largely supported, and you can see the figures for that on the slide. So overall, the key point to note there is those high agreement rates, which don't range too significantly. And I say this because, as we'll move on to cover, the comments of some respondents do undoubtedly paint a much more complex picture, and that has shaped some of our future considerations, which again I'll outline later, but it needn't necessarily overshadow this quantifiable majority of responses that are in agreement with the objectives. So, in terms of those comments, as I say, individuals were able to share their views on each objective and overall. For Objective 1, which received the most comments with 71, the first thing to note, and this is the case throughout, is that there was a small number of extreme negative responses. Not all of that language is necessarily repeatable in this forum, I think, but it is available verbatim in Appendix A if you wish to read it. You may have done so already. And I think that speaks mainly to the range of views in society on what can be quite a polarising subject matter. From our analysis, where there was more thematic disagreement with this objective, it was based around misconceptions that we wouldn't recruit on merit, that this might constitute positive discrimination, or that we're incorporating needless targets and numbers. And each of those is, as I say, of course, a misconception where this objective is really around increasing the diversity of our applicant pool. Positive comments on this objective did acknowledge the value of the objective, but they were conditional on ensuring that we continue to select the best person for the job. And there were also some neutral comments on this one around needing to share with staff why this is important to achieve. For the second objective, it received 45 comments, and again, the positive ones tended to be conditional on the need for support and training for staff, and particularly for leaders as well, in terms of how to identify and tackle inequalities or challenge inappropriate behaviour. Responses in disagreement to this one tended to suggest that this is not our primary role, which is fighting fires. For Objective 3, which receives the fewest comments with 37, it also received the greatest proportion of positive comments. So respondents tended to agree that this is an important objective, and they noted the importance of understanding and reflecting the diversity of Berkshire, and also continuing to increase our understanding of our different communities and their various needs. Negative comments on this one tended to again espouse the view that this is not our job and we should focus on our primary role, which is perceived to be fighting fires. For Objective 4, it received 46 comments. The positive ones tended to acknowledge that this should be a given in any organisation, and on this objective, the disagreement tended to be again related to misconceptions. So here, that it might involve employing people to falsely create diversity, or questioning what actions in response to this might be. Finally, respondents could also, as I say, add any comments that weren't related to a specific objective. Here we found that the views, again, varied very much in tone, but it did highlight a really useful point that respondents would like to see more information about how we intend to implement or achieve these objectives. So following the close of the consultation and to support consideration of this response, a cross-party member workshop was held on the 12th of April to consider any potential required amendments to the objectives, which resulted in a really valuable discussion around the objectives and EDI more broadly. Accordingly, and noting some of the above misconceptions and comments, a couple of alterations were proposed. So firstly, a small alteration to the language of Objective 4, which is detailed on the slide along with the other final proposed objectives. So the fourth objective really speaks now to building on our existing culture and continuing to take action in support of the work, so acknowledging the progress that we've made thus far. Another result to note of that consideration of response post-consultation, as outlined in the paper, is that it's proposed that when the final agreed objectives are published, they're also accompanied by a number of clarifying statements. So these will be developed in consultation with relevant internal groups such as the EDI Forum and the newly formed steering group, which I think should really help to alleviate some of those concerns expressed in the feedback by providing much more tangible explanations of the meaning of each objective and the ways in which we can seek to implement those goals, perhaps also with examples of types of actions as identified in the action plan. So finally, having just mentioned the EDI action plan, I'll just take the opportunity to delineate how these objectives fit into, or rather shape, the wider landscape of work around EDI moving forward. So the EDI action plan is the way in which we add that detail to the objectives and record our progress in pursuit of them. Those who formed the recent cross-party workshop have already considered some of our recent key actions, and the intention moving forward is that the next step following the agreement of these objectives is that we consequently revise the action plan in conjunction, as I say, with the EDI Forum and the steering group to ensure that we have a clear strategic direction moving forward in terms of how we intend to achieve these objectives. In doing so, a renewed action plan will be produced to continue to record the progress made across a range of areas. And the existing archive of completed actions can be held on the intranet to detail the journey that the organisation has taken so far. Should also note at this point, in line with all of this, we've been updating the EDI policy, also considering best practice and aligning to the tone of the commitments in the objectives, so that policy will be finalised and shared for consultation in due course. So with this, as is reflected in the Member Champion report, colleagues across the service have been continuing to work on a range of actions to support progress in this area. So I will highlight just a few of those to bring us to a close. So firstly, as some of the consultation comments rightly pointed out, it's really important that we remain broad in our thinking and that we don't overlook the less obvious ways in which we're all individually different. So one way RBFRS has been focusing on this really productively recently is considering neurodiversity and making more space in the way that we do things for doing things differently. So for example, the HR team has been working on creating a neuro-inclusive interview room and generally creating a more accessible interview experience for all applicants, as well as internally implementing a new neurodiversity profiler tool, which will support staff in understanding their various needs and strengths in the workplace. Related also to that topic of adjustments and inclusion, as you'll know, we achieved last year the Disability Confident Level 3 Leadership accreditation in the government scheme, and we've since continued to explore ways that we can become an increasingly disability inclusive organisation. So for example, we've been working on signage for our accessible bathrooms, which will be more explicitly inclusive of people with less easily visible or hidden disabilities. And that will also support all our colleagues to be more mindful of these matters, and again add to the range of ways internally and externally that we're looking to support people with disabilities or long-term health conditions, and of course more broadly embrace and support all kinds of difference. Secondly, one area that was discussed at the recent cross-party workshop was the Five Shires collaboration. So this is the group that was set up late 2020 by the CFOs of 5 services, so ourselves, Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, Gloucestershire and Warwickshire, to look at the wider role of our services in addressing inequalities and how we can pool our resources and our knowledge to sustain more progress rather than working on the same issues in isolation. So the idea is that each service commits to sharing with the group the key areas it's working on. So for example, we'll share information around those inclusive recruitment processes I've described. Others are combining their work on engagement events to share with the group. And crucially, the group is now also looking at equality data and how we can compare it, the measures we could develop to understand progress, especially regarding the more amorphous cultural improvement that we're seeking to achieve through these objectives. Just to say on that point as well around data, it's useful to note that the NFCC have recently acknowledged the disparity in the way that fire and rescue services gather and report on equality and diversity data. So there's not really a unified process in terms of what data we should collect, how and when we should collect it, or how we should seek to use it. So they've produced the EDI Data Toolkit, which will support this ongoing work in RBFRS and in the 5 Shires through looking at the different kinds of analytics we can use, how we can make best use of them, and that will in turn support us in evidencing our inclusive culture and the progress that we make, and also how we can identify areas for improvement for our staff and the communities we serve. It can also therefore usefully feed back into the objectives too and how we consider looking at our progress over the next 4 years. So more on those benchmarking considerations is outlined in Appendix B. Evidently there's a great deal more to explore there over the coming months, but some of this is already in consideration. And finally, it would obviously be remiss of me in this forum not to mention the Chairman's internship scheme, which, as you've heard, is our summer internship scheme for 16 to 18-year-old residents of Berkshire who are from ethnic groups currently underrepresented in the service. So, as indicated, we had a really good response for the first year. We've received 50 applications for this summer's intake, and we shortlisted from the completed applications down to 20. So those 20 candidates will now go forward into the group exercise to further test their skills, and they'll also have the opportunity to share more about their motivations for taking part in the scheme through an individual interview, following which we'll look to appoint to our 8 placements. And alongside that, the project team is working really hard on organising training for those involved with the scheme, designing ongoing evaluation activities to understand the impact of this work, and also organising a range of activities and development opportunities for the interns over their time with us. So it's undoubtedly been a huge undertaking for the project team, but for me it's really showcased the passion and dedication of our colleagues to work like this with the potential to make important change on an individual and an organisational scale regarding EDI. So all of these and various other actions are held in the EDI action plan, detailing how we seek to achieve those objectives. And again, that will consequently be revised and refreshed to set out how we intend to achieve our new objectives over the next 4 years and capture some of the fantastic work that's been undertaken by colleagues across the service. So in summary, the EDI objectives consultation has been a positive and genuinely insightful exercise that I think provides us with a really timely reminder of the many challenges that we face with regard to making progress across all areas of EDI, but that in doing so therefore reaffirms the importance of setting these new objectives and consequently renewing our efforts to integrate them throughout our work, thereby enabling us to improve the effectiveness of our activities and I think ensure that every individual who interacts with our BFRS experiences the reality of what we know is the strength in our diversity and the inclusive culture that we're committed to keep growing. Thank you for your time. I will now pass back to Becky to wrap up.
Thank you, Chloe. Well, Chloe's left me the easy job of just recommending to members the recommendation at 2.1 and 2.2 of the report and inviting any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. And absolutely brilliant job on the presentation there, Chloe. Thank you very much indeed. A couple of questions from me. It seems to me that we're doing an awful lot of work on EDI, but we've still got a long way to go. And I think that reading some of the responses to the consultation just shows that we've got a long way to go to educate people on this. But as far as the consultation is concerned, would you say that it was quite a positive response from most people? If you take out the unpublishable ones, would you say that it was quite a positive response overall?
Yeah, I think it was a positive response overall, and as I say, that was shown in many cases by the quantifiable majority of responses answering that they agreed with the objectives. The comments, as you say, paint a far more complex picture, and I think if you do remove some of those more extreme responses, many of the responses, even though they didn't explicitly say, I completely agree with this objective, were more offering feedback or suggestions of additional things they'd like to see, such as further support or training for staff, or support for leaders in challenging inequalities. So in that sense, I think it was positive to see that level of engagement with the survey and with the objectives.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Gittings.
Yes, so thanks, Chloe, for a really excellent presentation, really very detailed report. I mean, as the Chair said, some of the comments that, well, I suppose in a sense they reflect the issues that we're dealing with, and in a sense reflect there was a high proportion of white British, actually in all the consultations, where I think we're a lot of consultations tonight, and most of them are about 78% is white British. And not to say that people obviously commonly hold these views, it's actually a small minority, as you point out. I suppose my question is, what are we doing to address that in terms of getting more of a reflection of the population of Berkshire? I mean, I know that tremendous efforts are being made, and obviously you're really working hard, but what would be some key points we can take away in terms of trying to get more people from more diverse communities to fill in the surveys, and also then of course that would also reflect in the actual results. There'd be more people in favour of diversity if you have more people from a diverse community. You understand what I'm trying to say? So I just wonder what the key points how are you going to address those as we go forward? As the Chair said, there's a lot to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it is important that we continue to explore different ways that we can engage with a range of communities, as I say, both for the purposes of consultation specifically, but also more widely just to engage with our service. So in terms of different things that we're doing at the moment, Positive Action has been restarted really positively, I think, after the difficulties that we experienced during COVID. So some of those broader measures are things like the Chairman's Internship Scheme, which doesn't just seek to provide those internships, but also seeks to expand our engagement with different communities. So we've undertaken a lot of pre-engagement activities with a range of groups, meeting those target focus areas in terms of the backgrounds we're looking to attract in terms of ethnicity, with different schools and young people to try and engage them more in what we do and kind of raise our profile as an organisation, which we hope will hopefully translate into more positive responses to consultations in future. Other things that we're doing include running more positive action events in the community, so things like our Have a Go events. Some of those have specifically targeted underrepresented ethnic groups and have been held in particular areas of the county that we know are more diverse in that sense. So we're definitely restarting those efforts, I think, and I don't know if Becky or Nikki would like to speak more to that. But we're exploring a number of ways that we can do that, both for future consultations and for engaging with the service more widely.
Yes, probably just to add to that, we do have an established list of community contacts, so we're also working with them to understand better their needs and engage with community groups on a regular basis, which will help inform how we can better support them and better educate them, as well as programmes about career in the service, and starting that at a younger age so that people are becoming more familiar with what the service has to offer and how they may benefit in the future from opportunities, career opportunities and so forth. So it's multi-pronged approach.
Just as a follow-up, it obviously occurs to me that, and there's mentions here of Instagram and all things, that social media could obviously play a really important role, particularly in highlighting obviously what it's like to be a firefighter, to serve in control and things like that. For younger people, also from all backgrounds, would mean to be a fairly sort of obvious approach.
Yeah, probably just to come back to that, there is a range of social media approaches adopted both in consultation and in the way that we look to engage, and as a service we've been doing a lot of work around equality impact assessments, and what we learn from those helps shape how we respond to or target a particular activity. And there has been some good examples of that, and things like the Built Environment Programme in the way we communicate with members of different community groups. So I think it's a number of things that will come together to help deal with that as a response.
Okay, Deputy Chief Exec, I know you wanted to add something.
Yeah, just to add really that I think for this actual consultation, we sent out the consultation to 900 community groups. So we are keep pushing and knocking at that door. And I guess it's about building trust with those communities to respond to those consultations. So I think our list is growing, but any other contacts we're always welcome to take. And I think some of the things from the internship that we will hope to see from that is those young people who are successful going back into their communities and acting as advocates for us as an authority. So yeah, still much more to do, but I think you'll agree Chloe is excellent at leading the charge.
Absolutely. Any other questions, members? Yes. Who's first? Did you have
Thank you, Chairman.
sorry.
Yes, I'd like to thank Chloe and Becky for their excellent work in this consultation and certainly the presentation. It was very illuminating to read the comments from the public, and I noticed they often asked how we would measure achievement, which was something that I wanted to understand more about, how we are going to judge our progress each year towards achieving the objectives by 2026. So when will the action plan be presented, and will it have clear targets?
I would say in relation to the action plan, we have an action plan already which is monitored through our EDI forum and will be more so through the EDI steering group. So what we'll look to do is refresh that in line with the revised objectives, subject to members' agreement to those tonight. In terms of our performance and how we will measure our achievement against the objectives, some of that will build on measures that we've already got in place which are reported through audit and governance. and others will look to, as Chloe indicated, seek to identify what is provided for us in terms of the national toolkit that we can access, as well as the benchmarking information across the 5 Shires project to improve how we use our data and analyse that to judge our performance against some of those objectives. And of course, you know, we will hopefully be able to tangibly see some of that through our performance as staffing data, as well as data into the community. So how do we engage with, and how do we understand more about our communities to affect the way that we deliver our activities? So there will be a number of ways which we will see how we're succeeding in terms of our objectives. But I think we've got some of that in place already, which is reported through audit and governance.
Following on from that, will those objectives be SMART? You know, will they be, well, what I want to know, will they be measurable? You know, will we say we're 75% of the way there or 25% of the way there?
I think with some of the actions that will be easy. They will be an ability to judge whether you've delivered against them. For other areas, we will need to understand what we're learning as we go along and how we've applied it. So some of those objectives about understanding the community better will play out in how we deliver our activities, what we understand from a community group at a time in relation to the performance of our service, or how we might alter our service, and that might be iterative, and we might see that keep going, but it might not be as straightforward as looking at there's a target or a completed point at which we know we've achieved it. So I would say that there are already many actions set out in our action plan which we move through, evaluate and gauge against the objectives and how we might judge whether we're doing well. And as I said, I think we've moved on quite a bit. So for example, in delivering the revised equality impact assessment process with a good means of being able to measure that and track information through, as well as the supportive training that goes out to people, we've been able to determine that we have made changes to the way that we deliver our services as a result of properly looking in, or change the way that we've bought equipment, for example, as a result of our impact assessment. So there are a number of things that fit within that action plan.
Okay, I'm just going to come to the Vice Chair in a moment, but Chloe, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, just to add to what Becky's already outlined in terms of, as she's mentioned, there's lots of things that we can do in terms of data to look at the more quantifiable progress that we can make. We also now do report quarterly in the Strategic Performance Board, which goes through to Audit and Governance Committee against a RAG rating for each of the objectives, with commentary of what's happening to progress those things. And it's also something that we're exploring with the 5 Shires collaboration, which is what are the softer measures for EDI that we can develop in order to understand progress regarding culture, which is much more difficult to quantify. So we're looking at things there in terms of our engagement with EDI communications or activities, and other things that we can look to track to understand what good looks like for culture, which is more difficult, and as Becky said, something that we'll develop as we go along with these objectives.
Thank you, Chloe. Vice Chair, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. There was, well, first of all, Chloe, thank you very much for a very clear and good report. Appreciated that. There was one response that stood out to me. It's on page 31, 7th up from the bottom, and it says, there are a lot of vulnerable people who feel they get overlooked. Now, that links obviously to Objective 3, which in itself is fine, but what else do we need to do to make sure these people don't feel overlooked?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it speaks to what we've been covering in these objectives, which is the importance of developing not only links with our community when we want to know something from them, but also sustainable and meaningful links that continue throughout the year. So not only when we want to consult, but throughout the year, do they feel that we have a presence in the community? Do they feel that they can engage with us safely? And if not, what can we do to support that? So as Becky's mentioned, one really key tool for us in doing that is equality impact assessments, which allow us, when we're creating activities or opportunities to engage with the community, whether that's through engagement with schools or have a go events or open days, to ensure that we're pre-considering all possible members of our community and making sure that our events are accessible to them, that they're inclusive, and that they work for them in a way which will make them want to engage with us. But as you say, it's a really good question. It's something we need to continue to consider moving along to ensure that all our engagement opportunities are positive for people when they interact with us.
Nikki, you wanted to answer that?
Yeah, just to say that as a sector, there's a number of documents around equality of access, which are being prepared for particular types of vulnerable groups, which is sharing learning about ways and methods of engaging with these particular groups. And we, across our prevention and protection activities, are considering these for things like refugee hotels and those kind of things. And so as a sector, we're working quite hard to look at how we provide our statutory responsibilities to all parts of the community at different types of vulnerability. And we'll see later when we look at some of the stuff around the annual plan and some of the changes we're making around our prevention activities, that we are looking at referrals and looking at different ways of working. So I think it's going to be a service-wide initiative and not just something that's part of the, you know, isolated to the work that Chloe's doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, no other questions. Members, we've been asked to note the report, but we're also being asked to agree that the new proposed objectives detailed in 3.8 of the report be adopted and published. I'd like to propose this. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie Boyle. Members, this is an integral part and an extremely important part of the work that we do, that we not only represent all of our communities, but we're seen to represent all of our communities, and we reflect all of our communities from whatever background they come. And it is a fact that some people are, I hate this phrase, but they're known in hard to reach groups. There's no such thing as a hard to reach group. It's groups that we just have to reach because they're important. And the work that Chloe and Becky and the team are undertaking in this is absolutely incredible. And I'd like to go on record of thanking them both for this great report. Does seconder wish to speak?
Just to say ditto. Tremendous amount of work has gone into this, and I absolutely applaud all the activity that's gone in to get to this stage. I look forward to the next. So thank you both very much indeed, and thank you to the Deputy Chief Exec as well.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak? Okay, before I put it to the vote, the other thing I think that we have to do is educate people that have made these, shall we call them, disparaging comments. That, you know, this is not equality at the cost of everybody else. This is equality for all. So, and that's what we're after. So all those in favour that we agree the new proposed objectives in 3.8, please show. That is thankfully unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, members. We move on then to agenda item 13, excuse me, which is our automatic fire alarm consultation, and a summary of the report and presentation. Jim, I think
it's Katie. Jim's not here. But Councillor Smith was going to do a short introduction.
Oh, Councillor Smith, you want to do a short introduction on this?
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to be able to bring to members this evening this report, the outcome of our automatic fire alarm consultation. Katie will provide you with an overview of the results of the consultation that we've had so that we can conscientiously consider them this evening. I want to say that Katie has driven this consultation forward from start to finish, and delivered it in a very tight time frame, and as ever has done a great job. I'd like to thank Jim Powell and his team, which included Angela, who's here this evening, for their operational inputs into this. It has been a very complex issue. The important thing, members, is that as you will recall, we agreed to undertake a consultation in November 2021 because 99% of the automatic fire alarm calls that the service receives are false alarms. And this places a significant burden on our fire and rescue service. A significant amount of analysis was undertaken both to inform the consultation and to extract from it some meaningful guidance now for members, which resulted in an extensive consultation exercise, and the outcome of this we're going to hear now from Katie, so I'll hand over to her to give you some more detail.
Thank you. Katie, I'll hand over to you and apologise to you. Didn't realise we had the boss with us this evening to do it, so please.
Jim has sent his apologies this evening, and I'm presenting on behalf of both of us. And apologies, my voice does keep giving way, so I'm hoping I'm going to make it through the presentation. So, okay. That looked different. So this presentation supports the paper in your packs and provides an overview on what we've consulted on, how the service delivered the consultation, and an overview of the headline results that are contained in the summary report at Appendix A on page 77 of the agenda pack. Before I take members through the results, I thought it would be useful to play the consultation video as a reminder of the detail of the consultation. This consultation only relates to lower risk occupied buildings, for example, shops or office blocks. We did not consult on our response arrangements to higher risk buildings that include those with the sleeping risk, for example, hotels, student accommodation homes, as we're proposing no change to our response arrangements. And in those circumstances, if we did receive an automatic fire alarm, we would mobilise immediately on receipt of that alarm. So, we're just going to play the consultation video.
Every year, we receive over 2,500 automatic fire alarm notifications. 99% of the ones we attend are false alarms. We want to know if you think we should change the way we respond to these in lower risk occupied buildings. We're not proposing any change to high risk buildings and will immediately send a fire engine to these when a fire alarm goes off. Building owners have a legal responsibility to manage their fire safety. Currently, when an automatic fire alarm goes off in lower risk buildings, we call the occupier to confirm the cause of the alarm. For these buildings, if it is confirmed that there is no fire, we won't send a fire engine. If there is a fire confirmed, we will send a fire engine. If we can't make contact with the building, we will send a fire engine. Or, if the alarm goes off and the occupier is unable to confirm the cause on the first call, we will ask them to check as part of their fire safety measures. If the cause remains unconfirmed, we will call again for a second time. And if it is still not confirmed, we will send a fire engine. We're proposing that where we make contact with the building, the second call back is removed because the occupier will do their necessary checks and call us back to let us know if there is a fire. If the occupier confirms there is a fire, we will send a fire engine. If they confirm there isn't a fire, we don't send a fire engine at that time. If they don't call back, we won't send a fire engine at that time, based on there being no confirmed fire. Changing the way we respond to these alarms could save up to 1,300 hours of firefighter time each year, which could be used on vital activities.
Thank you. So we thought that was just a good way to recap the detail of the consultation. So just to summarise, the proposal is to make a change to the procedure used when responding to automatic fire alarms in lower risk occupied buildings. And the flow charts on pages 81 and 82 of the pack describe the procedure in detail. Option A represents the proposed change and option B is the current arrangements. The video outlined the proposed changes in detail, but to summarise, our current practice is to, on receipt of an alarm notification, make contact with the occupier. If they are unable to confirm the fire on making contact, control will call the occupier again after 20 minutes to confirm the cause of the alarm. If the alarm remains unconfirmed at this stage, we currently mobilise a response. And to stress, if we are unable to make contact with the occupier or a fire is confirmed, we immediately send a response. So to recap, every year we receive over 2,500 automatic fire alarm notifications, and 99% of the ones we attend are false alarms. This means on average we attend 2,200 automatic fire alarm calls that are false alarms. Following analysis of the data, we proposed option A, which is a modest change to our response arrangements, which can potentially save us up to 1,300 hours of firefighter time each year. And option A sets out the proposed change, which is, after making the initial contact with the building occupier, if a fire is not confirmed, we will ask the responsible person to make the appropriate fire safety checks and call us back if a fire is confirmed. We will not make a call back on this basis after 20 minutes and mobilise to an unconfirmed fire. Of course, if a fire is confirmed or we are unable to make contact, we will mobilise immediately. This change only applies to lower risk occupied buildings. So if the lower risk building was unoccupied, say it was a shop overnight, we would immediately send a response. Already covered that. So the service delivered a robust consultation using a combination of different methods to ensure that we reached as many of our communities as possible and gathered views from a wide range of people from across the county. The infographic on page 79 of the pack provides some of the headline information, and more detail can be found from page 84 onwards, and this includes how we use some new methods such as the video we just shown you earlier to reach our communities. Use of social media proved positive across all our channels, but we also engaged the community through our service delivery hub teams in face-to-face activities. This has ensured that members have valuable information to support their decision making this evening. The main findings are presented on page 90 of the packs with the headline results set out on this slide, and overall 62% of respondents favoured option A. Option A was the preferred option of residents, business owners, those responding on behalf of organisations and our staff, and the report breaks down the results in full. The survey also allows respondents to provide comments, and these were analysed using a coded methodology, and representative samples of these have been included in the report. So the option to change our approach was developed through the analysis of service data as set out in the consultation document at Appendix B, and aims to reduce the burden of false alarms. That means our resources can be deployed when they're often not needed. This change has the potential to free up time for frontline personnel to engage in other important activities such as delivering prevention activities in the community and preparing for incidents by carrying out vital training and visiting high-risk premises. The service has delivered a robust consultation and presented here this evening for members to conscientiously consider the results in order to determine the recommendation at 2.2 on page 73. And officers are recommending that Fire Authority adopt option A. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Katie. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chairman. Two questions. One, if we were to adopt option A, where would that put us in relation to other fire services around the country? And the other question is there an easy explanation for the fact that there were twice as many responses to this than there was to the EDI consultation?
So on the first question around option A, so I think across the country there's different approaches to responding to AFA consultations, and there are some that take a far more stringent approach to their response to automatic fire alarms. So for us, this would still be a fairly modest change that's acknowledging we need to move forward, but there would still be room to take a further step if we needed to, if we felt that it wasn't reducing the burden in the way that we needed it to. We do look at that analysis across the country to see where we sit in relation to it. And our intention is to evaluate throughout the course of the next 12 months to understand how this really is reducing the burden. And it may be after that evaluation that we need to come back with further steps, because this hasn't reduced the burden enough. So to start with, it would probably be fair to say it's a modest first step, but with the potential to take further steps moving forward. And on the second question, I'm not sure I can give you an easy answer to that, but typically we do find that where consultations relate to service delivery changes, the interest in them tends to be greater, and that can relate to the responses. So yeah, not an easy answer to say why, but perhaps it's because of the service delivery aspect.
Thank you. Any other questions? Vice Chair.
Thank you. If we do make this change, how are we going to ensure that all of our organisations know about it and know what the new process is? And also, how are we going to make sure that they know that they've actually got more responsibilities themselves?
So all the way along, we've been working very closely with, are you talking about the organisation responsible persons? So what we're asking of the responsible persons and the building occupiers are their legal responsibilities. So we're asking them to fulfil their legal duties. So that's not a change in terms of their responsibilities. So I think what's really important is we're making contact and we're having that conversation as part of this process and explaining to them that they need to go away and do those fire safety checks. And as I said, if we're unable to make contact or a fire is confirmed, we of course immediately send a response. Internally, there will be a period of time where we ensure our Thames Valley Fire Control colleagues are prepared to implement the change, and Jim will be working closely with Simon Harris to make sure that that's in place and appropriately communicated to staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Werner.
Yeah, thanks. I remember we had a debate when this was first brought about the style of the consultation. I would say that the consultation came out a lot better than when it was first looked at the meeting, so well done on that. I thought the video was particularly impressive. It actually made it really simple. I need it simple to understand it, so thank you. I suppose I was looking at the consultation and 11,000 people being reached through Facebook. It's you know, what's the population of Berkshire? It's not a big percentage, is it? I mean, it's 0.001% or whatever. Is this typical of consultations that the Fire Authority does? And what can we do to improve? Because you know, it's difficult to base a decision on such a small percentage, and especially as probably most of the people were attached to the, I don't know, Fire Authority Facebook, and so sort of on the inside, if you like. Do you have thoughts on how we can improve on this?
So I'd probably refer back to some of the conversation in the previous item, and in particular some of the responses that Chloe gave and Nikki's point around equality of access. So I think that probably sets out how we're intending to improve moving forward. I think the one thing with these consultations is we don't rely on any one method. So even with social media, we're doing that across a range of different channels with different types of content, and we're doing lots of face-to-face activity within the community. So I think I would refer back to previous conversations and comments and think that it's something that we have to learn and improve every time. So the video, as an example, was something that we wanted to try differently this time to see if we could get increased engagement by trying an animated approach and really simplifying some of our messages. So it's certainly not perfect. We've got a way to go as an organisation, but what's really important is we learn from what's worked this time. We build that into our next consultation, and we keep looking for new and different ways of engaging our communities. So I think probably Chloe, Nikki, Becky have set out some of the ways in which we need to do that moving forward.
Thank you. And again, video fantastic. Well done.
Any other questions? Yes. Councillor Stanley.
it's really more for comments rather than a question. It's really good to see that you included an easy read version for people with learning disabilities, and also that the video had non-white people in it. So if we are going to say we're going to increase diversity and inclusion, it's really important that we do it across everything. Thank you.
Which we did.
Which exactly what we are doing.
Absolutely. Any other questions, members? Okay, I'm going to move from the chair the recommendation, which is on page, well, it's recommendation 2.2. Sorry, I'm halfway through my report here. What page is it on? We are on page 73. Which is that we note and consider the results of the consultation as set out in the summary report at Appendix A, and that we agree with officers' recommendation and that we adopt option A. I was seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Members, as you know, we went through quite a lot of consultation even within ourselves as members here. And I would like to go on record to thank those members of the Task and Finish group that spent their time going through and designing this consultation in a way that we felt we could reach as many people as possible. I understand that around about half of the respondents were from staff or people attached to the Fire Authority, but that means the rest were public, and so that's great. And a 68% response in favour of option A is quite significant when it comes to consultations and statistics. So I would recommend that we save these 1,300 hours a year without any detriment to the service that we're giving the people of Berkshire. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Yes, sir. I'd just like to echo what you've said, Chairman. Just for clarity, it was 62% in favour, but I think that is a clear majority and a clear steer towards what the public feel that we should be doing. We always were concerned that this small change, which is targeted at a very small group of people and a small group of buildings, low-risk buildings, might be taken out of proportion. And I think we've been very careful to target the message at those people who would actually be affected. And we also knew, members, that the service compared to other services around the country has been rather over-generous in the way in which it's responded to these false alarms in the past. So the HMI inspectors have told us that they're looking to us to see whether we can make improvements. These improvements will be improvements in time that are available for firefighters to do more safe and well visits and so forth. And as a result, I'm sure the net impact of that is going to be to increase public safety, not reduce it.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Thank you. I'll take the Vice Chair and then Councillor Gittings, then Councillor Werner. Is that okay?
Yes, I support option A. As you said, Chairman, there's been a lot of discussion about this internally amongst members as well as officers, and that includes a cross-party working group. And it's clear that our current position is wasting a lot of resources that might well be needed somewhere else. And most of the fire alarms that go off that don't have a fire, it's just a fault in the alarm system that set it off. And as we've heard, if we adopt option A, we'll still be amongst the most generous of the fire authorities in the country. But just one point I'd like to ask officers to take on board. It would be nice to know in, say, a year's time, whether there were any occasions when we didn't send a fire engine and there was actually a fire, including whether there were any casualties, so that we could just monitor, whether it's had a bad effect or not. I'm sure it won't have, because I think this process is pretty watertight. But it would be nice just to be reassured on that, please. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Gittings.
No, obviously in support of option A, and I think it was the member scrutiny actually initially on this was good, and the working group to obviously to frame the consultation in the right way, and I think it was reflected in a sense in the excellent video that I think we're all agree was shown, and I presume that was shown on social media. Doug, I mean, it was on an unrelated incident, but Doug Buchanan actually very kindly showed me some figures for the fire, for instance, in Reading, in our area over the few months, because there just seemed to be a lot going on. It's interesting when you look at the figures. I've just sort of dug them up, but for instance, in September 2021, there were 180 fire incidents, that crews attended, but of those incidents, 62 were false alarms, 24 I think were false alarms with good intent, and I think 3 were hoaxes. So that's a big proportion of calls. Now I don't think, obviously, under these proposals, we still wouldn't be going out for a lot of those false alarms, but if we can cut down that number to say a third of all incidents, that would be a result. And I think probably the inspectors would see that was a good result for us, but also the crews can do community work, prevention, those type of things that I think will help us with those other measures we spoke about earlier. So I think this is highly supportable.
Thank you. Councillor Werner.
Thanks. I suppose 2 points come to mind. It's difficult to make a decision on this based on the limited consultation, good though it was. So really, and 62% of very little is still very little. So I suppose it comes down to whether it's the right decision. From what the officer said, it's almost like a trial, isn't it? So we'll look at it again in a year, gauge its success, maybe go further if it doesn't get the results we want. But following on from Councillor Hellier-Simmons' point about if we get it wrong, when we do that review in a year's time, if we've got it wrong, then we can actually go back to the current system. So really, it's a trial for a year, and let's see how it goes. And on that basis, I can support that.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak? Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, members. Nobody's spoken against the proposal, but I just will sum up for everybody's point, for everybody's view. We are not talking about homes, we're not talking about hotels, we're not talking about hospitals. In fact, we're not talking about anywhere where anybody sleeps. What we're talking about is offices and shops that would normally be open during the day, and the only time that this would apply is when they would normally be open. So at night, we'd still go. The automatic fire alarm goes off. Whether it's a false alarm or not, we go, because it's at night and there's nobody there. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, for those of you that have ever visited our Thames Valley Fire Control Service, you'll know that when there's a real fire, we don't get one call, we get 30, we get 40, and if it's a busy road, we get hundreds, because everybody wants to tell us that there's a fire. And I'm sure you'll agree that if there's a real fire, it won't just be that one automatic fire alarm that's gone off. It will be lots of people calling us, telling us there's smoke coming out of the office building. And of course, the other thing to remember is that in saving these 1,300 hours, this is not to allow firefighters to be able to sit around and watch TV. This is 1,300 hours saving where firefighters can be productive in preventing fires, in protecting people, in doing safe and well visits, in doing education on fires. It will have a tremendous impact. And if you used to look on the side of our fire engines, once upon a time they used to have a thing on the side called Prevent, Protect, Respond. And that's the order in which we should be focusing our activity. Prevent fires, protect people against fires, and then respond. So I think that this has been a great consultation. We would have liked more numbers, but even the numbers are significant. And if you look at principles of surveys, this is still significant. And so therefore I would ask you to support the recommendation that we adopt option A. All those in favour to adopt option A, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, members. Members, we've now been sitting here for the best part of almost 2 hours, so I'm going to propose a 5-minute break before we go on to the next item. I now make the time, it's 8:18. Shall we say 7 minutes? We come back at 8:25. Is that okay? So the meeting adjourned. Christian, I'm good to go. Okay, well, welcome back, members, and thank you very much. And let's reconvene the meeting. So the next item on the agenda is item 14, which is the annual plan. Becca is going to give us a presentation. Nikki, I know that you wanted to introduce it.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And really just to note an error within the paper at the moment. So obviously for this part of the meeting, I thought it might be getting a bit quiet, so I added in an obvious error for members to look at. But no, thankfully, I'll call it again, what will we do without Angus when he has gone? But actually, this is the annual plan for 22-23. But when you roll over the page, you'll see it says annual objectives 21-22. That is not the case. It is annual objectives 22-23, and apologies, and we will make sure that we do a thorough proof of any other minor errors along that way. I can assure you that the detail of the report is correct, and it would seem that that was at the cost of some of the headings, but I will hand over to Becca. Sorry, Chairman.
Thank you, Becca.
Thank you, Nikki and Chairman. So the annual plan sets out the annual objectives for 22-23 for the organisation and details the specific activities we'll undertake this year. It follows a similar format to plans from previous years and includes information about our intended activity under our priority programmes and sets out how we'll manage risk and assurance this year, including a summary of the internal audit plan. The plan also details our corporate measures and targets for the year. We're suggesting some changes to our corporate measures this year in a number of areas, and these are detailed further in the covering paper. These changes are as a result of a maturing of our understanding of risk in our communities, evaluation of our current practice, and alignment to indicators used by the Home Office and the Inspectorate. Our corporate measures will be underpinned by further service level measures and assessment. The recommendation is to approve the plan, and that's at 2.1 of the covering report. I and the officers present are happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Becca. Members, do you have any questions? No? I'm told it's getting late, aren't you? Okay, in which case I'm happy to move the recommendation at 2.1 that we approve the annual plan 22-23 as amended for dates. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you very much indeed, Becca, for this plan and for everybody that's worked on it. I did actually comment on this when I first read it, but I think this is a really clear, we have an annual plan every year, hence an annual plan. But this plan, I think, it really sets out not only the objectives, but why these objectives are in there and what we're going to do to achieve these objectives, which I think is really, really good. It gives anybody that wants to read it a clear understanding of where the fire service is heading and why they're heading there and how they're going to get there. So I think that's really a real improvement. So thank you very much indeed. Does a seconder wish to speak?
Yes, please. Yeah, I'm very happy to second this. It's a really, really thorough document. It's not so many years since we didn't have such a document at all. Probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I think we had a very, very slim annual plan, if one at all. There are just a few comments I'd like to make that perhaps could be built in for next year's annual plan, if not for this one. I would have found it very helpful to have had the targets that we met last year and by how much, not just what the targets were, so that we could measure as a whole fire authority how well we've done against that previous target. If possible, for the last 3 years, so that we get some sort of trend data. And the other thing is, I wonder if the targets for the next year could be a little bit more robust. We've got several that say to monitor. Well, if you're monitoring something, does that mean you're just sitting back and watching what's happening without doing anything? I'm sure that's not what's intended. But it comes under number 9, number 18, numbers 24, 25 and 28. I mean, how many do we have? How many should we expect? It would be good to have some more robust expectation down of what we want to monitor and what we want to achieve through that monitoring. And similarly, there's 2 that say reduce, that's numbers 3 and 4, and 1 that says improve, number 13. I'd like to see some figures on how much we're going to reduce, how much we're going to improve. I mean, it could be a slight reduction, it could be a big one, we don't know. And I know we have this information in other documents, but I'd find it quite helpful to have it in with this one as well, if it's not too much trouble to look it all up. Presumably it can't come into this current one, but maybe it could be borne in line for next year. Other than that, it's a superb document. I'm very happy to second it.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak? Okay. I think some of those comments would have been quite useful as questions when we were in questions, actually, because it would have given officers a chance to have answered those comments. I mean, I was going to ask a question about we're proposing to move away from a specific targets for safe and well. But I think it was more important that they're in the annual plan, that we are measuring them, that we are highlighting them, and we do have specific targets for them. I'm sure the officers will come back to you in due course with the comments that you made. But I mean, it's not a time now for officers to answer questions because we're in debate. And in summing up, I just think it is a very, very good annual plan. Yes, it can be improved, but I think it's a long way from where we were. So I'm going to ask you to approve the annual plan as laid out in 2.1. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, members. Agenda item 15 is adoption of the Royal Berkshire Fire Authority Member Code of Conduct. Graham, that's your one.
Thank you, Chairman and members. The genesis of this item is the resolution of the full authority at its meeting in November 2020 that its members' code of conduct should be reviewed in 21-22 with the committee, in line with the Committee on Standards in Public Life's recommendations, including that where possible, in any review, the views of the public, community organisations and neighbouring and appointing authorities be taken into account. Following approval by the Audit and Governance Committee at its meeting on the 24th January 2022, the draft Code of Conduct, which is at pages 169 to 189 of the agenda pack, was subject to a 6-week period of consultation. The draft Code of Conduct was based on the LGA Model Code of Conduct that was finalised in May 2021, with any changes or additions shaded yellow for ease of reference. Additions include the incorporation into the Code of Conduct of the NFCC's Core Code of Ethics, which you have heard about this evening from our colleague Nikki Richards, to mirror the standards of behaviour expected of Royal Berkshire Fire Authority's employees throughout the service. Another change from the LGA Model Code, which members of the Audit and Governance Committee requested, was for the threshold for declaring gifts and hospitality to remain at £25 rather than to be increased to £50. The summary of the consultation responses is at pages 191 to 206 of your agenda packs, and some narrative about the responses is included at paragraph 3.5 of the cover report, which is at pages 166 and 167. For information, 3 of the unitary authorities, the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, Wokingham Borough Council and Slough Borough Council have adopted the LGA Model Code of Conduct, with small differences requested at their respective authorities. For example, Windsor and Maidenhead and Wokingham have maintained the threshold for the value of gifts and hospitality to declare at £25, whereas I believe Slough has adopted the LGA's increase in value to £50. At its meeting on the 23rd of March 2022, the Audit and Governance Committee considered the consultation responses and unanimously agreed that the draft Code of Conduct be recommended to this full authority meeting for approval. Chairman and members, the recommendations are at page 165 of your agenda packs.
Thank you, Graham. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Werner.
Thank you. The Windsor and Maidenhead gifts and hospitality, yes, it was kept at £25, but it was also kept at a certain amount over the year, because it was realised that someone can receive a gift of £25 a week, and it actually mounted up to quite a lot of money. That's something that we raised from our side. What's the position of the Fire Authority, and is that something that should be considered?
I can take that, Chairman. Yes, it's any gift on any instance where the value at that point is £25 rather than the cumulative.
So in fact, you could have £25 a day, and that would be within the Code of Conduct, which is rather a worry, isn't it?
Well, it's declarable within a month of receipt, so it's declarable. Each instance engenders a requirement to declare it on each occasion.
But if it was £24.99, you wouldn't have to declare it.
That's correct.
I think the point that the councillor's making is if somebody gave me £20 today and then £20 next week, that would be £40 from the same giftee or gifter. Would that be declarable?
No, on the basis that it's £25 on that occasion.
Yeah.
I think it's worthy of note, though, that is one part of the member code of conduct, and if you look at the remainder of the principles within the code of conduct, acting with integrity and honesty, treating people fairly and with dignity and respect, there are a range of opportunities in there that conduct of that nature could be called into question and appropriately considered by the monitoring officer or by the chair of the authority.
Yeah, I'm happy to go on with the Code of Conduct. It's just when it comes to its next review, if that can be flagged up as something we can incorporate it, I think it would be really useful.
Thank you. If anybody wanted to give me lots of money, I'd happily declare it. I'd declare it every day. Any other questions, members? No, in that case, I'm going to move the recommendation that the Royal Berkshire Fire Authority Member Code of Conduct, that we note that consultation and that we agree the adoption of the Member Code of Conduct. Can I have a seconder, please?
Chairman, I have much pleasure in seconding the recommendations.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak? Did you wish to speak, seconder? Councillor Gittings.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is obviously an excellent piece of work. I mean, I careful what I say here, but I kind of make the point that it's interesting that local councillors, members of Fire Authority do, if you look at this Code of Conduct, which is pretty strict, and we're talking about £25 gifts and all sorts of things we have to declare, it seems to be held to rather high standards than people in another place, not adjacent to here, where obviously we've heard stories today of all sorts of things going on. Now, I'm not to say that that MPs don't adhere to a high standard, but I think it's quite prescient that tonight we're passing this very, very strict Code of Conduct. and the parliamentary standards don't appear to reach that, and indeed in terms of some of the declarations of gifts and all sorts, we've seen some quite serious breaches of that, which I think unfortunately does drag down the general feeling of politic, of the perception of the public of politicians, when we know that councillors, not to blow our own trumpet, actually work very hard for actually really small amounts of allowances. We have to declare gifts of under £25, whereas others, those rules don't seem to apply. So I just think it was kind of ironic in a way we're passing that when all some of the furore is going on in Westminster. I'm not making judgment on people in Westminster because I know there are lots of good people there, but I think the rules for councillors do seem to be somewhat stricter than they do for MPs.
Yes. Tony.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, I was very happy with our two major discussions and work on this at our meeting at Audit and Governance. I think that that was very valuable, and the consultation feedback was also very positive as well. I'm very pleased that we're actually, as a couple of other unitaries, are updating and also reminding members on the Code of Conduct. And I would hope that some other authorities who are going to delay it for a couple of years would reflect on this. But I just thought I'd mention that, Chairman, and I will be supporting this, the adoption of this Code of Conduct, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak? All those in favour to approve the Code of Conduct, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. We move on then to the most exciting part of the evening for me. Whenever we can talk about pensions, there's got to be a good day. And Becky, I know, looks forward to this with bated breath. So over to you, Becky.
Thank you, Chairman. The report before members tonight outlines the latest position in relation to immediate detriment cases under the MacLeod Sargent ruling. Following the agreement by the LGA and the Fire Brigades Union on a memorandum of understanding and a framework for addressing such cases, Management Committee at its meeting on the 7th of December agreed the partial adoption of the framework for Category 1 members, that is, those members who have not yet had their pension benefits brought into payment. It was the intention of officers to present to Management Committee on the 5th of April for Category 2 members, that is, those individuals who have already had benefits brought into payment. However, on that afternoon, we learnt that new information relating to the adoption of the framework was to be provided to Chief Fire Officers. The report was therefore deferred to allow officers time to review the position. This new information relates to the Treasury response to the Firefighters Pension Scheme Advisory Board, and in their response, which is contained with the report at Appendix A, they set out more detail relating to the withdrawal of their informal and non-statutory guidance on the processing of immediate detriment cases, emphasising the risk in a number of areas. Namely, they relate to tax relief on contributions, the payment of benefits to date, new and increased lump sum payments, annual allowance tax charges, lifetime allowance charges. The letter provides significant concern to officers who recognise that in addition to the complex interplay with the tax system, other aspects of remedying legislation are not yet clarified and will not be until secondary legislation is in place. This secondary legislation will have to address many complex matters and is still being worked through and will need to go to consultation later this year. Whilst the overall objective is to ensure individuals affected by the discrimination are afforded access to their pension benefits as soon as practicable, the uncertainty, absence of reliable information and the associated risks to individuals, employers and scheme managers of additional tax charges has been considered in recommending that the framework is not adopted for Category 2 members. In coming to the decision to recommend that the authority does not adopt the framework for Category 2 members, officers considered that members are already in receipt of some pension benefits and that any adjustment to these in the short term could create significant consequences for individuals as well as the service and the pension administrator. Resolving any issue of taxation that might arise before changes to legislation could lead to significant administrative challenges with HMRC for individuals in addition to employers and could be disproportionate to any benefits received. This is a complex and dynamic situation, and officers are having to rely on best information available to inform recommendations. The paper sets out some of the challenges associated with this matter and highlights the associated risks. Subject to the authority's decision on this matter, we will inform Category 2 members, of which there are 12, of the decision. The main recommendation is set out at 2.2 of the report, which should read the Fire Authority, not Management Committee, and the authority is invited to agree that the authority does not adopt the immediate detriment framework for Category 2 members at this time. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Becky. Members, do you have any questions? No questions? Okay, then I will move the recommendation, which is at 2.2, that agree that the Fire Authority does not adopt the immediate detriment framework for Category 2 members at this time. I have a seconder for that, please. Thank you, Councillor Pennyworth.
I'd like to second that, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, as we all know, we've had many times these papers before us. And I know I mentioned earlier that, you know, I look forward to this, but I'm not being flippant. The fact of the matter is this is a very, very important paper, and it affects 12 of our colleagues at the moment. What we don't want to do on this is we don't want to start paying people amounts of money that have to be recovered later or have to be recovered by the tax system later, or cause an additional tax burden on these members. If at a later date it is shown that we should adopt this framework, then we will certainly do so. But at this time, our counsel and our advice is that we don't. And therefore, I think that it's only right and proper that we protect our members, our pensionable members, from any undue pressure. Does the seconder wish to speak?
I'll reserve my right. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak? All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you very much indeed, Becky. Agenda item 17 is the corporate calendar. Nikki, would you like to take us through that, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and I hope a somewhat more straightforward item for members this evening. So this is just to formally approve and agree the corporate calendar for the new municipal year 22-23. You will note that despite Faith doing an absolute sterling job of trying to get all the dates in, we did ultimately find one clash, and we have need to move the originally proposed management committee meeting to the 18th of July. So that is the one change from what has been shared previously. I would also note that after the June meeting, when members are appointed to the relevant committees, the specific dates for the specific meetings will be added to calendars. So members this evening are asked to agree the change of date by one day for the management committee meeting to the 18th of July and the remainder of the corporate calendar for 22-23.
Thank you very much indeed, Nikki. I know that Faith spends half her life trying to fit meetings in with our unitary authority meetings, so it's not surprising that we have sometimes had to make changes. Anybody have any questions on this? No? Okay. I'm not quite sure if Councillor Stamford, Bill and Ross want to declare an interest in support or a disinterest in this, as they won't be here. But does anybody wish to speak on this? No? All those in favour that we agree the remainder of the 22-23 corporate calendar, please show. Thank you. 2 abstentions. Thank you. That's agreed. Members, the next item on the agenda is to note the reports of the champions. I take it you've all read the reports. I intend to note the reports on block in 2.1, but does anybody have any questions on the champions reports? Then are you happy that we note the reports as they are published? Thank you. Agenda item 19 is the forward plan, which is recommendation to note the forward plan. Has anybody got any questions on the forward plan? I'll take that as read. Agenda item 20 is minutes of the standing committees. That we note the minutes of the committee meetings were published on the RBRF website. Anybody got anything to say about that? Good. And the date of the next meeting is Thursday, the 30th of June at 6:30. Thank you very much indeed, members, and thank you for bearing with us on what is quite a long meeting, but I'm sure you'll agree a very, very interesting one. And I would just like to take this last opportunity to thank both Councillor Stamford, Bill and Ross for their service. And just to let you know, I have got a couple of cards here that I need one more signature on, and then you can take them. I declare the meeting closed.
So hopefully I'll see you. Unless my leader.